that is our guest speaker today. Bill Schloneker is the Crane Certification Program Supervisor and Crane Technical Specialist with Washington State Department of Labor and Industries. Bill, we are so thankful that you are joining us today and going to provide us information on what's cooking in the crane world and the PIT world. We appreciate you taking time, and I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I first want to say I am having technical difficulties this morning. That's why my camera's off. I'm trying my best to make it all work here. Let's see if I can even share my content.
Ted Lutz, turn off your video.
Okay, I don't know. Can you all see my screen where it reads high-level summary of changes?
Yep.
Awesome.
I can see it.
Perfect. Thank you all. Again, apologies. This is it's been a heck of a morning here. Okay, so just as you all know, or if you're not aware, Washington State has opened their construction crane wall. Due to the fact that OSHA initiated some changes that we were not currently as effective as. And some of those changes were forklift when used as a crane, operator certification, well, which we did have, the operator evaluation, which we did not have, and the flash butt welding truck exemption. So we took the opportunity to update the rule as we felt as well, like as we made additional changes. Some of those changes were forklift is being used as a crane. We did some tweaks to the power line rule area, tower crane assembly, disassembly, and or reconfiguration. 2,000 pound under section we altered. The crane certifier certification, the crane certification worksheet / annual, lift director qualifications, assembly disassembly director qualifications, rigger duties. We added them into the duties of assigned personnel, and multi-tier rigging. And also, as a quick note, this presentation and the current construction crane rule pre-draft rule are available on our website. And if you want some assistance finding that, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll get it for you. Okay, so just beginning the OSHA initiated changes. Forklifts. And this is a 3-hour long presentation, so I'm trying to cram it real fast here, sorry. Forklifts being used as a crane, the OSHA language. It's under their exclusion section. The construction crane rule for OSHA states that this does not cover power industrial forklifts except when configured to hoist and lower by means of a winch or a hook and horizontally move a suspended load. So it's been in OSHA's language since 2010, but this change made by OSHA in 2018 added the certification of operator requirement as well. So our current construction crane rule scope reads, forklifts, when configured to hoist and lower by means of a winch or a hook, and horizontally move a suspended load are exempted from the crane certification, and they also do not have to be certified. That's our current language. But they are included in the construction crane rule, meaning everything else in that standard would apply. So just not the machine needing to be certified and the operator needing to be certified. So our draft language reads, forklifts, when used to lift, lower, and or horizontally move a suspended load, are included, aside from the machine needing to be certified. So what this change would do is any forklift that has a gross capacity of over 2,000 pounds being used to perform construction work to lift a suspended load would require a certified operator. That's the addition that would take place, because we get a lot of questions saying, well, what if we use a shackle, or like I've been in the industry for a hot minute now, and I remember my foreman, burning a hole in the forks, and we're throwing a shackle in there to lift our steel. That's all of those type of situations would be included in this change. Whereas right now they have to follow Part F1, which isn't as strict. So it's kind of skirting the construction crane rule and they're doing it in a less safe manner. Multi-purpose pieces of equipment. So OSHA also has this language that we're adopting. If you're getting the oddball, machine that's going to be considered a crane or multi-purpose piece of equipment that's being used as a crane, that would fall into our standard. We say, okay, we'll accept the most similar certification because you do need to be certified, a certified operator to operate. So for forklifts, NCCCO currently offers 2 forklift certifications. I am in the middle of drafting because CTAG, they make the determination as to which certification covers the machine. So they have not been asked on the vertical forklift what would apply. So I am in the middle of drafting a letter to reach out to them and ask, all right, here's a straight mass forklift. What certifications available cover this piece of equipment? So I am in the middle of that. Evaluation, we're going to add operator evaluation. I'm not going to go into all the details unless, of course, we have time and people have more questions on that. John, I just now happened to notice the chat box. I'm so sorry. I have not been meaning to ignore. Again, technical difficulties there. The intent of the multi-purpose language to capture excavators. No, so in our current construction crane rule, we do, and Allison, thank you so much for that. We do have a list of exemptions. The excavators are currently exempted, and the plan is to keep them exempted. About welding trucks, that's not going to impact the majority of you unless you work near on the railways. The additional changes. So for power lines, we made some changes. There's going to be, you're already required to have a power line meeting, but it's going to be documented. And in conjunction with this, we're currently internally developing an app that, if followed, should walk you through all of the different requirements to ensure that you're following the power line rule as well. And we're hopeful that at the end of using that app and following through, it will then produce a meeting for you as well. And then the same thing, so the first section was for assembly, disassembly. This is for working near the power lines. The duties of assigned personnel. So we made some alterations to the site supervisor section to ensure that the assembly, disassembly zone, work zone is adequate and the access into the zone is controlled. When you have a tower crane, is tower crane specific, assembled, disassembled, or reconfigured, sorry, you need to notify us, and this is the information that we want. On your job site, display the name of the site supervisor, AD director, lift director, rigger, signal person, and crane operator. This could be as simple as a dry erase board on the machine or in a job shack. We're adding rigor into the duties of assigned personnel. And so what this is doing is really spelling out what duties the rigger needs to do, but it's also lifting one duty off of the lift director requirement that's currently out there. The lift director currently, their last duty line, I think it's subsection O, they have to ensure that the load is properly rigged and balanced before it's lifted more than a few inches. We're taking that off and putting that back onto the rigger because the lift director is more of a supervisory role. Okay, I'm getting a couple questions here. Are you looking for special upgraded certification for forklifts using cranes, or are you requiring an upgraded certification for all forklifts? So just like OSHA, we're saying that the testing organization needs to be nationally accredited. So currently, only NCCCO offers that. I have had a meeting with EICA. They are interested. I don't know which path they're going to go, if they're going to continue and actually develop one, but I'm encouraging them to do so. Can you explain if there's language difference from the manufactured hook shackle that is attached to the machine compared to using the attachment? Can you explain if there's language difference from an engineered? I'm not, Austin, I'm not 100% sure about the question, but this is the kind of, to me at least, what I'm reading, it's similar to what we're currently getting asked. I had a phone call this morning asking if they welded an attachment on their forklift, would that fall into our standard? And that's kind of the thing that we're trying to address. Like we're wanting to say, anytime you're using a forklift to lift a suspended load, to perform construction work, this is going to apply. So choose the correct machine for that job site for the, because every construction site's going to be different. Choose the correct machine, knowing that you would need a certified operator if the gross capacity of the machine is above 2,000 pounds. We also have a process that's not going away to derate your machine. And so for those situations, we can certainly talk about that and how you would derate your equipment. And then you would follow that 2,000 pound under section. You would not need to have a certified operator. When does this go into effect? We don't have a specific date yet. We are doing, we're hopeful that we can, institute it sooner rather than later, but that's still going to be maybe the end of the year before any of that would happen. Some machines have the hook below the forks. Does this qualify? Currently, yes. When you are using your forklift currently with your hook to lift a suspended load, the construction crane rule does apply. But currently, you don't have to have a certified operator. You'd have to have a qualified rigger, qualified signal person if working in the blind, lift director, the construction crane power line rules apply, all of that. But also, one person can wear multiple hats. So your operator can be your lift director. They can be your qualified rigger even. It's it can be a one-person deal for forklifts especially. Mandy, did OSHA directly tell Dodge to make these rule changes to PIT? We have put in public records request to understand what we are truly required to do per OSHA. We've reached out to OSHA and asked the question, what are you planning on doing? We have not heard back yet from my understanding, but we have put it out to them. Brittany, does the forklift certified operator need to be through the NCCO? So the draft rule reads, just like OSHA, they have to be issued a certification, I'm paraphrasing off the top of my head, issued a certification through a testing organization, which has an accredited program. And so currently only NCCO offers that. But like I said earlier, EICA is interested. We did have a meeting and they do sound interested. So it's not NCCO specific, it's just they're currently the only ones that offer it. So just like when the crane operator certification went into effect in Washington State well before OSHA. At the time, it was only NCCO. And now we have OECP, we have NCCER. For a hot minute, we had CIC. I think they are on track to getting their accreditation back, but I can't speak for sure yet. I have to look into that. But there are, multiple organizations that offer crane certifications that are nationally accredited. And so I do expect that to happen with the forklifts as well. Let's see. Have there been any citations related to the PIT being used as a crane? There have been citations to PITs being used as a crane. They vary all over the place, not following manufacturer's recommendations, not having a qualified person as a lift director, not having a qualified rigger, et cetera. There's been plenty, yes. Is any union planning on having all their union employees meet this requirement? NCCO certified operator, rigger, cert, and lift director, carpenters, laborers, operators. So currently the operating engineers union out of the Portland area and then in Washington State. Well, let me just speak. Washington State currently does, off the top of my head, I was told that they have 8 practical examiners ready to go. Washington State as a whole has 15 practical examiners that can issue the certifications, and that there's been, I want to say I was told 18 are willing to come into our state to issue them as well, if the need arises. Plus, this is not even in effect yet, so there's going to be time for more entities and personnel to be in place to issue the certifications. But I have reached out to the Carpenters Union, I've reached out to the Operators Union, obviously, the Pipefitters Union, the Ironworkers Union. If there's anybody else that's interested, please give me a shout and we can talk about this. What other states are changing their rules if this is in fact driven by FedOSHA? So as far as like state plan states, I'm not entirely sure. This is already in effect in OSHA land, but Washington State, we were hoping to move this along, but then COVID happened, which really slowed things down. We're doing our best here, and we're close to the finish line. Do you have a contact at NCCO for the training? Yes, if you shoot me an email, I will put you in contact with them. And my email address, I'll just write it down right here. That's can't even do it right. There is my email address. Please feel free to shoot me an email. I'll put you in contact. I came in late. Is there a weight lift limit of 2,000 pounds? So currently in our rule, it's the 2,000 pound and under section is being altered slightly, but currently we do have a 2,000 pound and under section. So if the gross capacity of the machine is 2,000 pounds and under, they don't require a certified operator. They have other different items that they have to follow, but they don't have to have a certified operator. And then Rob, I will address any questions related to operator certification at the end of this presentation. Perfect, thank you. Hasn't OSHA stated that their initial requirements for the certification were erroneous and they withdrew that requirement? So currently in their rule, this is what it read, like what I showed earlier. We've heard the rumors that they like, oh, we made a mistake and we plan on changing it, but they haven't. They didn't take that opportunity to do it in 2018. That's why we reached out to them to say, like, what is the plan? Because we have to write a rule that's at least as effective as your current written language, but what is going on? So we have reached out. They haven't done anything official. It's just rumor at this point. Okay. To assign personnel, AD director can specify the CFR. I'm not sure what that question meant, Justin, I'm sorry. Although this rule is under 155 construction, this rule migrate to the include general industry, warehousing, distribution centers? I can't speak to the future, Joseph. I can say that Washington State requires certified crane operators, and we have for many years now, and that has not spilled over into the general industry environment yet. So take that as you will. I can't speak to what may occur in the future, though. AD director, their duties continued. So tower crane specific, simply work zone. We've created a definition, and then there's different requirements around that definition that I showed you earlier with the site supervisor. And like what we were talking about earlier, 2,000 pound and less. So some of the alterations we made, New York City did a blanket situation to where they require their 2,000 pound and under to be tethered. We did not want to take that approach, even though we have had some of these smaller cranes fall out of buildings. So the approach we took was that you need to work with an RPE to determine how you can prevent this from occurring. And so we'll let that, we feel that this language allows more flexibility versus saying you need to tether it. We also adding the requirement for qualified rigger, lift director, and operator evaluation. Okay, I will address that as well, Dan, because I'm writing. I'll share those done. Referring to the OSHA CFR, what is the standard? Can you send or send language? Yeah, I'm sorry, that was at near the beginning here. Here is the OSHA language, 1926.1400, subsection C, exclusions, subsection 8. Meaning that rule does not apply except for when you're using a forklift with a winch or a hook. So if you're using a forklift with a winch or a hook in OSHA land, the remainder of that rule applies. Definition of certifier. So currently, to become a certifier, you need to take a series of written tests. The Washington State specific tests they would have to do in our facilities. Once COVID occurred, we were not open to the public, and so this really created a challenge that we had to overcome. So the change will read basically that we will accept the national crane certifier certification in conjunction with a singular Washington State test. And if you have a camera on your computer, you may take it from your own home even. The change will also allow for the certification to be valid for 5 years versus 3. The worksheet / annual. So this will impact you if you own a crane. Currently, the certifier will come out, inspect your crane, load test your crane. They will issue a worksheet. They will send the department a worksheet. We will process that worksheet and mail you a copy of the annual. What this change will do is your certifier will inspect, load test your crane. If everything's good, they'll leave you a worksheet / annual certification. They will then email us a copy. Everything's good. That worksheet / annual is your annual certification. You would no longer be waiting for something from us. The hope is that we can also alter our crane stickers to be a QR code. And so you would just scan that QR code and you would see if the crane has a current annual, you would see if it's red tagged, all of that information would be right there. Will certificate to apply to forklifts too? Only if your forklift was built to one of the ASME standards. Otherwise, no, that the forklift would not need to be certified. Do we have to do an annual cert of the forklifts that fall under the standard? Brittany, no. Again, unless it was built to the ASME standard, because some of these forklifts, they're pretty close to also being built to the ASME standard. They may just go ahead and embrace that on some of those machines, but for the standard fixed cab that you're seeing on most of the job sites, no, you would not need to have that annual certification. Well, according to this and Rob's portion, be sent out post-meeting. I can't speak to that. AD director qualification. So AD director, we've created a qualification section along with a test. This can be in-house or third party. Training for assembly to assembly reconfiguration work. All employees need to have training. For tower cranes, it must be available on site. Please elaborate on the QR code for annual inspection. Is that what LNI would issue or the independent certifier? So currently, a certifier, like if you own a crane, you can look at your crane right now and you have what's called a C number sticker. It's issued from the department to the certifier and they place it on your crane. It's only a one-time thing. So once it's there, they leave it unless it gets damaged or something. But what I'm talking about, it's not in rule, it's just something I'm pushing for, is that a certifier we would be able to create new crane C stickers that would replace those existing stickers. And that is what you would scan in order to see your annual or to see if it's red tagged, previous inspection history, etc. That's just something I'm working towards. It's not currently that way, but that's in my mind. It's much easier versus hoping that the paper still happens to be in your cab. Will LNI be on site for assembly, disassembly? So that question, in order to answer that question, like I can't really answer yes or no as of right now. You may have heard that there was a tower crane bill that went forward and it did pass and it was signed by the governor. We have to now, we're going to see what we can institute now, but we're also going to have future stakeholder meetings that address some of those changes. So I don't really have an answer for you just yet, but that's going to be part of that. Jamie, 53404U reads exactly as the same as the CFR you referenced. So why are you stating you need to make change to meet OSHA requirements? 52900. Wait, so in our current rule, Jamie, we exempt forklifts, just like OSHA exempts forklifts, unless that forklift is configured with a winch or a hook, same as our standard. But we're trying to get away from that. Like I mentioned earlier, we get all of the questions, just like I had a phone call this morning. What if we weld an attachment on the bottom of our right behind our forks? That's truly what we're seeing on these job sites. When they don't have that built-in hook, they're trying to be creative, and I get it as a very useful tool, but We want it to be clear that anytime you are using that forklift to lift a suspended load, that this rule would apply, including throwing rigging over the forks, over the backstop, any of that. So we're not getting into the means and methods, just when you're using a forklift to lift a suspended load, it applies. Multi-tier rigging. So there was a little bit of confusion during the stakeholder meeting, so I want to kind of address that first. This is not changing the steel erection code. This is not replacing any of that. This is separate. So for general multi-tier rigging, Christmas tree, more commonly called in the field, we want to address that because we didn't have rules aside from, don't be below a suspended load, those sorts of things, edge protection, but we didn't really have anything addressing the multi-tier rigging. So we addressed it. You're limited to 3 tiers versus the 5 in the structural steel. Slings need to be protected, hooks with self-closing latches. Appropriately rigged, 7 foot apart. When it's landed, swing the remaining loads off to the side so there's no overhead hazard. No material shall be basket hitched. So we did get some feedback on subsection G saying, well, what if we double wrapped it? If you also feel that that should be altered, please feel free to send us an email, and I'll show that email address here really soon on the actual comments. We're accepting comments up to, well, I think it's the 15th, but I think that should say here pretty quick too. April 15th. So send your email to Cynthia Ireland right there. If you have comments about this draft rule, and then we will address them there. Powered industrial trucks, forklifts, F1, rigging requirements for material handling is located in chapter F1. Yes, that's correct. And that's the thing. So currently, if you are using your forklift to lift a suspended load in a more unsafe manner by throwing it over one fork or whatever, they have to follow F1, not the construction crane rule. And we feel that we are, if we continue going forward with this language, we're going to be pushing more people to be creative to try to skirt this rule. And that's not really the intent. Will an existing NCCO operator have to requalify for the forklift? So OSHA has an internal memo that if a compliance officer comes to a job site and they have a certified operator running a piece of machinery that they're not 100% sure if it actually covers that machine or not, to reach out to the testing organization. And so I have already done this question. I said, hey, for forklifts, if this was in effect in Washington State, what certification would we accept? And for CCO, they say, well, it kind of depends if it's fixed cab or swing cab. So it'd have to be one of those. One of the crane certifications would not apply, would not cover it. And that's similar to what we see currently for cranes. So I am available for more questions. You can give me a call or shoot me an email. I don't want to take up Rob's time. I'm so sorry, Rob, for barely leaving you any time, but I will hop off, and then again, please reach out with any questions.
And that's quite all right. That's quite all right.
We'll just keep going. We'll just keep going until everybody's happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bill, please stick around in case we do have any questions. We do appreciate that information, and we're hopeful to get maybe PDF copies of your presentation so we can just see an update of those standards, because I know we will be requested to see some of these items if that's possible, please. Let's see. Now, next on the list, we have none other than, I'll pull up my presentation here so y'all can see it for an official announcement. Rob Sherberth, who's a senior trainer at Overton Safety. And Rob has joined us today to provide us information on what some of the operator training requirements are, and potentially maybe address a few of the challenges that we may have may be facing as a state in order to get these things in line in a timely fashion. So, Rob, we'd love to hear about the training portion of this, and any details that you can provide to the community is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
No problem. Steve, I wanted you here. All right.
Rob, do you have a presentation? Do you want me to get off the screen here? Or are you just going to talk?
I do. No, I'm gonna share some things.
Copy.
Is it possible that we just do a kind of a 2-minute timeout here, or a 2-minute break? I've got to talk to Brian real quick on the side.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any questions while we're waiting for Rob with regard to Bill's presentation, I saw that there was a number of different things that popped up in the chat room. And Bill, you did a great job by answering a lot of these questions. I'm sure there's still going to be more questions, and it's great that you posted your contact information. If you wouldn't mind. Oh, there you go. You got your email in there. I saw it in the chat room. So you can get a hold of Bill directly, and he's very responsive. Bill's been very helpful when I've had questions in the past. So please feel free to email questions, comments, concerns to Bill, so we all can take a look at it and get the information that's needed. Let's see if there's anything else going through here that we missed. This will definitely, definitely have an impact to the industry on how we approach this particular form of lifting with regard to powered industrial trucks. As everybody knows, this is would be a significant change and requirement across the board for many outfits, and using various different types of forklifts. It doesn't indicate specifically to Class 7 or all-terrain. It's also refers to straight mass forklifts as well. So those of you who are operating those particular types of lifts should be in the know on that front. And I'm sure Rob's going to provide a little more detail for you on this. Rob, we're thankful to have you today, and would look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks, Bill. Bill and I have been through this a few times. I've been part of the small group crane. I don't even know what we call ourselves, but the group that gets together that has been involved in the editing and the creation of the rule and the language of the rule to ensure that it meets, or in some cases, our case here, exceeds some of the federal requirements. There's a couple things I do want to share, because stakeholders, every one of you on this call, if you are affected by this rule, are a stakeholder. Stakeholders have the right to make public comments and to make comments related to the rule. And I think there's a couple things you need to know that are they're answers to some of the questions that I just saw. So if you would allow me to share my screen. Here we go. Sorry if you see something you're not supposed to see. First and foremost, I did this presentation January, I want to say, of 2022. This presentation, as well as the video version of it, which is a videotape of the CCO practical exam, is still available on the PSASS YouTube. So here's the link. I was about to put it in the chat box here. Let me grab that link and I'll put that in the chat box in a minute. But this is the presentation that shows the actual practical exam on the YouTube. So I'm going to put that in the chat box so you have that. In the meantime, I'm going to minimize my screen. Yes, Mandy, I thought this job in Chelan was rather intriguing, so I looked at it. I'm looking at the CCO website right now for accredited examiners for telehandlers in Washington State, and you will notice there is one. It is myself, and it takes them a minute to update that, so I'm sure the unions have a couple additional ones. Is anybody here from 302 or 612? Anybody on the call from 302 or 612? I didn't see Dean's name. Anyway, and Bill, I don't know if you know if the union has done anything yet. Last I talked to Dean, they had not gotten anybody through the process. A lot of mobile crane examiners, but not telehandler. All right, I'm going to bring your attention. Hopefully you can see my screen. And what you're looking at here is an OSHA compliance directive. And you'll notice the effective date, if you can see it, of February 11th, 2022. I can also share this in the chat box for direct, or you can just simply type in this number right here, CPL 02-01063. The point of this is to identify there are some differences between the federal OSHA requirements or the federal OSHA interpretation of the rule and what Washington has proposed, specifically as it relates to powered industrial trucks. The elements of compliance that relate to powered industrial trucks use the word and a hoist when it comes to compliance. You will not find one single citation in federal OSHA states or from federal OSHA that relates to using a forklift as a crane when hooking to a boom attached connection or boom attached attachment. So whether it's that hook or that shackle that was manufactured by the manufacturer or it was an attachment placed on the fork. OSHA compliance directive. We're not talking about the rule. We all know what the rule says. We saw it on the screen. Bill's screen didn't lie. It was word for word exactly what the rule says. Configured with hook and or hoist is what it says. But it also says and move the load horizontally. Big difference here is you'll notice our rule says and or move the load horizontally. That word, that little slash or, suddenly includes straight mast forklifts as opposed to simply telehandler forklifts. And nowhere in any rule will you find that driving the machine is considered horizontal movement. It is by means of swinging or booming. As a result, our rule affects and goes well beyond the federal rule as it is written today, because of the inclusion of a straight mast forklift. Now, Bill had some really cool pictures of some straight mast forklifts with some very unique attachments that did have telescopic booms and did have hoists. Well, there's no arguing that machine is being used as multi-use machine used as a crane, and it would definitely qualify. But your traditional put a Star Industries hook underneath your forks, lift the load, and move it is excluded under federal rule. And our state or our current draft of the rule does include that with the word or, because our rule says and or horizontally. Now, the comment about the rumors that OSHA is going to change, they're right. They had a chance in 2018, although they didn't, because the only portion of the rule that was open for change was the operator certification section of the rule and qualification. They did not open the exclusions and exemptions and scope of the rule when they opened that portion. But this is the language from the compliance directive. 1400 CH Charlie 8 powered industrial trucks when not equipped with a boom and hoist. In that case, they're exempt. There's another statement here, and there's a whole flow chart in this document that goes through the right here. So powered industrial trucks configured to hoist and lower by means of boom and hoist and horizontally move a suspended load are covered. That's what this green line is over here. So again, the language is not ambiguous. It's not rumored. It is fact. Let me show you another portion of OSHA. This comes directly from OSHA. OSHA Gov Cranes frequently asked questions. When is construction using a forklift required to comply? Here's what it says. Equipment that is designed to function as both a crane and a forklift would be considered multi-purpose equipment and covered by the crane standard when configured to hoist and lower by means of a winch or hook. So now they threw that in there, right? Because that's exact language out of the rule. And, not and or, but and horizontally move a suspended load. However, OSHA intends to propose amendments to the crane standard, which will clarify that forklifts are excluded from coverage by this crane standard unless they are equipped with a boom/jib and a hoist and used like a crane. This is OSHA statement here. This is why OSHA has not cited it. This is why there's no need for our rule to go above and beyond the OSHA rule with language. Our rule as written that includes the use of a hook and or winch should say and winch. Our rule that says and or horizontally move a suspended load should simply say and move. That would exclude the straight mast forklifts and put them right where they belong in 296-863, which covers forklift qualifications. One of you put it in the comment section perfectly. Operator qualification and evaluation is part of 863. There have been citations for using the equipment inappropriately or not properly training individuals that cite 863 because that's the appropriate rule. If anything, perhaps 863 should be updated. Instead of creating a vertical standard that addresses it more specifically, the core standard would simply and could simply be applied. So those are some things that I wanted to share from OSHA. Let me open up my Teams real quick here because I couldn't see if anybody had any questions related to that as I was going. So any questions specific to that? Okay, I'll put it, Tony, I'll literally add it here in just a second. Let's see what's first. I had a bunch of stuff in my little save. So let me put that there. Here's the frequently asked questions. Let me put this in here for you. Sorry guys, I'm not, like Steve said, if my granddaughter was here, she could probably do this in a second for me, but I'm not capable of putting all three things in there at the same time. So, yeah, boom, boom. All right, there they are. So, Mandy, I'm not sure if you're willing to share what you're going to do with your AGC members as far as letters or statements here necessarily. Brian, I shared that information with you. But I think it's incumbent on each of you stakeholders to make your opinions known. If you feel that straight mast forklifts with attachments below the hook that move machines without a hoist should be included in the rule, then leave it as is. If you don't, then comment. Somebody asked a question about financial impact. There were questions in here about training. Who's got their hand up? Whoever has their hand up, just go ahead and unmute and ask. I'm not capable of.
Hey Rob, it's Mandy.
Go for it.
Just wanted to say that AGC has put in a public records request asking the department to indicate exactly where the impetus for this portion of the rulemaking is coming from, because it's been stated multiple times that OSHA has told them that they have to, but as of yet, I don't have any proof or any, and I don't want to say proof because it makes it sound as though there's something nefarious afoot here, but we don't have the actual language of what OSHA is telling us we must change. So that's the first public records request that we put in. The second public records request that we put in was as a result of the number of times that the department has said that there's been an increase or a substantial number of these incidents with specifically like straight mast forklifts, but any forklifts that this rule change would have made substantial impact on. Obviously, that public records request is going to take some time, and it won't be in before the deadline to have commentary back to the department on the 15th. So, we are putting in some written commentary, and I've seen the Overton written commentary, and y'all did a spectacular job. So thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions? There's a couple other points I just wanted to make about some of the stuff that I heard related to or saw in the questions about training. So there's different ways of looking at this. If you have a forklift operator that has gone through an appropriate forklift training program, internal, external, third party, accredited, not accredited, there's really no such thing as an accredited training program. Really, it's the testing that's accredited. And that operator has knowledge of crane related regulations, 1926 subpart CC specifically, then that person is eligible or could be the person or persons that qualify or certify for the telehandler operator certification. The certification itself, it's included in that presentation that I did last year. I'll just go ahead and just pull up some of the or 2 years ago. I'll just pull up some of the highlights on it. By the way, for those of you that have never met me, there's a lot of new names on this page. I'm Rob. Rob at overtonsafety.com. If you have fat fingers like me, and that's not meant to be literal, but I type incorrectly all the time, and you type to Ron inadvertently, he will get your email and he will answer it as well. So both Rob and Ron can answer questions at overtonsafety.com. My cell number's up on the screen. I've been with Overton for 18 years now. I've been a CCO examiner, which they now call a proctor, for 14 of those years, and I've done thousands of operator certification exams. I helped CCO develop the telehandler operator certification program for both fixed meaning a machine that does not have a rotating capability, and rotating telehandlers, which there are a handful of Magnis and Manitous and JLGs and Daiichi. I miss any? I think that about covers the US market anyway, of rotating telehandlers. So this certification is two separate certifications. It consists of a written exam that includes both. So 170 question written exam, which you get 60 minutes. There is no literal load chart calculations. You have to score, I think this cut score changed to 70, is offered on computer based. So as Bill said, just like the crane accredited crane certification exams, these tests can be taken from home, they can be taken from work, they can be taken at a testing center, or they can be taken at what we call an event-based process, which I feel is the easiest of all. Hard for us, but easy for the candidate to take as part of a training program. One of the things I really think the industry needs to get behind is, I seem to be the only voice that is arguing a bit with CCO about their certification program. Number one, it's the only one. And even if the other organization that Bill was talking about does create a program, 98% of those people affected by that program are electrical workers and electrical trades, because that's where that certification has been used. It is not publicly available to all in all industries as CCO is. There are some little nuances within that program. But the one thing that they did when they developed this program is they required a 3-year practical evaluation, CCO administered practical process for recertification. I've rebutted that a few times, but was told that it was designed to include both general industry, which we all know requires a 3-year evaluation by the employer, as well as the crane requirement. But the reality is everything else under the crane requirement only requires a recert at 5-year intervals. This alone is a huge financial burden. It's not only a financial burden, we've had operators, I think we've tested 70 or so operators over in Spokane that were ahead of the game before the rule came out. Most of them are going to be almost expired by the time this rule becomes effective, and they're going to have to go through the practical examination process all over again, which is a very challenging process. It's challenging from a skills perspective. It's more challenging from an asset management and a site location perspective. Having the site that meets the requirements, having the machine that meets the requirements, having the machine that operators are comfortable operating. Like I can tell you the first time I tested 30 some operators in Spokane, over half of them failed, but they weren't at all familiar with that particular machine control type. As soon as I put them in a Skyjack with old hydraulic levers and retested them, they all passed with flying colors. So it has a lot to do with equipment familiarity. It has a lot to do with the ability of the operator. This isn't your first time operator type going through the certification process. It's somebody that understands the machine fairly well. The practical evaluation does include the driving elements of a regular powered industrial truck, as well as pallet stacking procedures, as you'll see if you watch this presentation and watch the video. But that doesn't mean that it should be required at 3-year intervals, in my opinion. I think some pushback to CCO, some comments, some questions. The fact of the matter is the only reason this certification, quote unquote, by an accredited certifier exists is because it's being used as a crane. All other crane operator programs require a 5-year recertification process, which does not require the hands-on portion, only a written test. I would encourage, if you have operators that go through CCO programs, to make those comments to them as well. Because quite frankly, when they hear it from me, when they hear it from Overton Safety, they think it's just us complaining about how many practicals we have to do and how many people we need and what our assets necessary would be to complete it, when the reality is this is affecting you. The more they hear from you, and Tara Whittingham is the person to comment to at CCO, the more they hear from you, the more likely they are to consider change. It's a commissioner decision, it's a board of director decision at CCO, and we have no influence on that whatsoever, or very little influence. So I just wanted to point that out. So again, the qualification or certification consists of both a written test as well as a practical test. The written test, last I checked, still had a 100% passing rate, because the initial group of people that went through the certification, I want to say, I don't have facts here. I have speculation based on what I've known and who I've talked to. But I'd bet over 80% of the people that tested originally were also certified crane operators. Well, that gives them the advantage of knowledge that crane-related tasks, skills, and rules and regulations would include on the exam. Whereas a forklift operator that has not been through any sort of crane program would struggle with those questions without some additional training. So I hope that makes sense. I think at this time, I'll leave it up to some questions. There were a couple back here that I said I would address, and I want to make sure that I did. So while I'm looking at those, if you have a question, just go ahead, unmute yourself and go for it, or type it into the chat box. Those of you that asked about financial impacts, all I can do is tell you what CCO and a training organization like myself would charge from a financial impact to you. If you elect to have somebody go through a preparatory class, we're talking 4 to 6 hours of training. There's a cost associated with that, of course. You have to take a written exam. The CCO fees for a written exam are flat fees that the candidate pays for upon application. I can't even remember what that number is. Let's just say it's $200. The practical exam, has some fees that go directly to CCO, about $100. And then you have to pay the accrediting or the certifier, the proctor that's doing the exams for their time and for their testing. I think Ron mentioned at the AGC meeting in his notes, in a 10-hour day, which starting July 1st, CCO is putting us on what we call a 10-hour optimization window, where we have to optimize our time of doing tests within a 10-hour window, and we are not permitted to test beyond a 10-hour window individually. I could only probably do 9 to 10 practicals in a 10-hour window with properly prepared candidates. So that becoming July 1st is about a realistic expectation. So 8 to 10 tests per day. Is it possible we could do more if we had a second examiner? The answer is yes. And that is certainly an option where we could have one person take over where that person picks off, say 4 hours later, the second person would start, do duplicate exams, but that requires space, that requires testing equipment. Those are things that would have to be provided by the by you. Quite frankly, we have not yet worked out any sort of agreements with any rental companies or owners of equipment for space and testing opportunities, but I'm certainly open to that. If you know that you have a machine and you've got an open space and you're willing to be a host, that is certainly something we would be happy to work with you on.
Rob, this is Dan Crawford. Got a couple questions for you.
Go for it.
First one, it looks like from what you've said so far that those that took the practical exam, and I'm referring to the written one on the computer, because you said that it's on computer now, not on paper and pencil, right? Most of those that passed, 100% that passed, had a crane certification prior to taking the test. Most of our guys in forklifts do not have crane certification. So doesn't that appear to you to be kind of testing with a certain slant that's not reflective necessarily of the industry? Therefore, why is the exam that way? And is there a way that we could have it more reflective of what the forklift operators generally have to do?
So obviously that is a CCO question, but the purpose of the CCO exam, I wasn't part of the written exam development for this particular program. I was for a couple others. But the way that they build an exam and they build it is based on the knowledge required for that operator to be determined competent based on the skills required for that task. In this case, it is focused exclusively on the forklift being used as a crane to lift and place loads with that boom or hoist. So those are the tasks on the practical that are heavily emphasized, and those are the points of interest on the written exam. I will tell you that a good portion of that written exam is general industry related. If it's general industry related, then most of those operators would have that percentage, let's say 40 to 50% of the test knowledge already. But because that machine is being used as a crane and subpart CC, or in Washington, Part L would apply, subpart L would apply to that operation, then they need that crane knowledge. They have to have the knowledge that is competent to demonstrate competence as an operator of that equipment in a crane related environment. Best example I can give, power lines, right? The general industry rule on power line safety as it applies to equipment being used near power lines is vague at best, and it still uses the old calculation of 0.4 inches per kV beyond 50. None of that is in the construction regulations, whether it's Washington or federal. It's 20 foot must be maintained unless we establish the voltage and we determine the volt distance based on the table, and we set a warning line and we have a meeting, which the state bill mentioned. It was just a quick little review, but one of the requirements in 53408 in WAC is going to be to have a meeting with all personnel affected by that power and that equipment being operated near that power line, and it requires documentation. That's a add to the rule. But anyway, that's an example where 4 or 5 questions would apply in that area because Now we're using that machine under the crane standard as opposed to the forklift standard. So I personally, I've taken the test, I've certified, I reviewed a lot of the questions. I was part of the committee, part of the development committee, part of the ongoing committee that reviews the future of the test. And I think the exam is fair. I think it addresses both forklift operators in general industry as well as the crane related requirements and knowledge requirements of a forklift operator following the crane rule. The only thing I don't agree with is that 3-year certification requirement. I am 100% agree that the employer should do a 3-year evaluation of the operator, but I do not believe that the accreditation or the certification of the operator should mandate that is a 3-year renewal. I think that's pushing the extremes, unfortunately. And
Thanks for
yes,
sharing that,
Ryan.
Bob. Yeah.
Yep, no
I
problem.
had another question for you though too, and that is that, in our company, we do both a written test and a practical being out in the field. It's not timed, but we are lifting the same equipment that we have on the job site, which means that we have our low boys or our trucks and we're putting equipment on that and they have to basically secure the load. And basically we're trying to simulate what we do in the field. And a number of our operators looked at that video there and we're going, well, geez, that's not really reflective of what we do, with basically PVC pipe and the width and stuff like that. We look out for other equipment in the area, make sure that the surface is even, da 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 da. You know what I mean? In other words, they're wondering why that type of a practical exam is used rather than actually doing something that's typical in the field, where we have our laydown area, if you will. And just wondering what you think about that as being an option.
Well, I'm not sure what any other accredited organization would do. I just know that as being part of the development for this particular exam, there were extremes. There were operating engineers at sites that did training with their equipment at their site that wanted it to be exactly what you talk about. Let's pick up a load, let's travel with the load, let's have a 40-foot high vertical rack that we are forced to put things on. Let's, all those skills. And then there's little old me and a couple others like me that said, wait, time out. How do we make that portable? How do we transfer that to hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of operators, not just, those that are being trained at this fixed facility? And that's where we came to a mutual agreement that the PVC vertical station would appropriately represent placing a load at elevated heights. And I think it does. The straight line corridor is pretty accurate, I believe, for a fixed. On a rotator, if you're going to start rotating a load, you better have load control. So the key word here is, does the practical exam accurately determine competence of an operator? And should a competent operator be able to complete the tasks in the required time or in the allotted time to achieve certification? And after watching many of these, I believe the answer is yes. I passed the test myself on one of those Magnis. I think I barely passed. We don't know these days because all we get is a pass fail. But it was nerve-wracking. It was challenging. It certainly demonstrated competence, if not almost a little higher level than that. But I do think it's a good test, and it does demonstrate the ability to use the machine as a crane for those skills necessary and required. And it was just really hard to develop a portable test that would be fair to all, right? I mean, if let's unload rebar and watch how it bends compared to the guy who's only unloading lumber, right? That's not, neither of those are exactly the same. So let's do a test that's similar with these pallets and see these stackable pallets and see if this could somewhat represent a pallet of lumber or a pallet of something on the job. So I like to say that it's a solid test, and a practical test, and CCOs continuously reviewing those processes and receiving feedback from candidates and proctors like myself to improve the process. That I will say. Ryan, your was that a question? It's just to clarify, if you're using a telehandler class 7 with a jib attachment, so it has a hook, non-rotating, yes, it's affected by this rule. If there's a hook and you can boom up, boom down, boom in, boom out, you can horizontally move the load with or without rotation is irrelevant, because the word and horizontally move is in the federal law. So yes, it would be affected. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. I didn't want to look it up while I was in the meeting. Any other questions? And Rob, you asked a question about backlog. There is no backlog because everybody's waiting, right? Brian and I have had this conversation a few times. Like, oh my goodness, all of a sudden this rule is going to be effective. And now with only 2 or 3 people or 15, as Bill said, I can't find 15 in the country, let alone in the West Coast. But nonetheless, find the people to come in and do the testing and do the certification for you. There's no way. And Ron put the pencil to paper and basically he said it would take over 3 years to get all the required operators through the certification process as it is right now. That is true if we wait until the day that this is published. If we get a little ahead of ourselves, get a little ahead of the rule and prepare in advance and get certified starting this summer instead of waiting until next summer, I think that the odds of success are greater, but still extremely challenging. Somebody asked a question about cost. Bill put the cost direct to CCO. That practical exam fee only covers the practical exam fee to CCO to be authorized to test. The examiner fees are something completely different, and that's what we would charge per test. So I think Ron threw out a budgetary number somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500 per operator if they went through the 6 to 7 hour. I think we're doing a 6-hour class. We have 100% pass rate, by the way. So if you go through our 6-hour class, forklift operator knowledge, and then we add on the crane stuff during the class, take the written exam immediately on a computer at the site available for testing. We have 100% success rate. So that's a 1-day process. The second day or third day or beyond would be the practical. And the practical, the allocation of time is 1 hour per person. That's what it is. It's 1 hour per person. So somewhere between $1,200 to $1,500 is a budgetary estimate. And somebody asked about financial budget review. Those are the types of numbers that need to be included in that financial impact of the rule. Any other questions, comments?
Rob, I noticed one thing that you had pointed out at the beginning of your presentation is that the verbiage in OSHA discussing a winch, the and or, I believe is what you were talking about. And it looks like stateside, we have very specific language that says or, not and. And with that being said, that definitely makes some ripples with regard to what we would have to do stateside with regard to straight mass forklifts and all forklifts for that matter that fall under that category. Is that accurate?
It's 100%. And Bill can tell you, I mean, we've had this discussion month to month, meeting to meeting, and or. I always, hey, let's eliminate the or, just and or, nope, just and. It's that has definitely been a difference between the federal rule and the Washington State proposed draft language.
So just to kind of follow up with that answer is that if that literature read specifically and, that would eliminate the need for an additional certification that is accredited above and beyond our current standards that already require us to be to provide training and evaluation based on the type of lift that they will be operating in the environment?
So there's two ors, Brett. The and/or hook and/or hoist is in OSHA, right? Bill pointed it out. He went back to the slide, showed you exactly where it is. It's under the scope, 1926, 1400. I believe it's Charlie 3. It's specific in OSHA that says hook and/or hoist, which would so it's a tricky little sentence. It says with a hook and/or hoist and horizontally move a suspended load. Our language says with a hook and/or hoist and or horizontally move a suspended load. The second or is the one that gets the straight mast inclusion versus exclusion, because the straight mast forklifts don't have the ability to horizontally move a load. You could, like I said, you could argue the driving portion, that's not a legitimate argument. You could argue tilt, that's not a legitimate argument. If it had a telescopic hydraulic jib on it, well, absolutely. If it has a hoist, absolutely. The argument is, and Bill's 100% correct, there have been rumors, and I showed you that under the frequently asked questions as well as the compliance directive, that OSHA intends to change the language in the rule, and they never intended to include a telehandler or a forklift in any way, shape, or form that did not have a hoist. It was always intended that if a hoist was included, then it was a crane, it was being used as a crane. If it simply had a hook, it would not. Our draft rule includes the language as is, as opposed to the intent, as opposed to the future, which literally, line for line, word for word, probably the way it needs to be. However, I believe I still can't find a 10-foot fall protection leading edge working height requirement in federal OSHA, but yet we have one in Washington, and we've gone we've gone not as above and beyond in some areas as we have others. I believe in this case, if we wrote the rule based upon the suggestions of OSHA and the statements of those frequently asked questions, as well as the compliance directive, that if the machine had a hook and hoist and could move a load horizontally, if that's the inclusion, that would cover all those magnes for the most part. It would cover several telehandlers that include a hoist into the process. And I wouldn't even have a problem with the language of and or hook when it comes to the use and Bill hit the nail on the head. If the rule doesn't include that application of a telehandler with a jib or the telehandler with a hook, there's going to be 100,000 telehandlers doing the work that 100,000 cranes should be doing. But the reality is we have to have a rule that somehow is realistic, and I don't believe the industry believes that the straight mast forklift should be included in this element unless it has a telescopic ability or a boom ability and a hoist ability. So if the language and horizontally stayed there, it would only include those straight mast forklifts that had attachments or used components that would allow that, as opposed to straight vertical.
Well,
Ryan,
very thorough answer, and thank you so much. There's a couple questions in the chat room for you.
Yeah. So Ryan, so CCO doesn't train the trainer, period. Because there's no such thing as training through CCO. Does CCO allow employers, individuals to become practical exam proctors? Yes, they do. You'd probably have to host a proctor workshop on your own because there hasn't been a public workshop since this program's inception, except at ConExpo. So as Bill mentioned, you can get a hold of Tara directly or get a hold of CCO directly and ask them about the process. Their website describes the entire process of how to become an accredited proctor, which is the practical examiner that does the administration of the exams. There are some conflict of interest things you have to be concerned with, that even in July, when some of the conflict of interest goes away, there will still be some conflict of interest that still applies. So you got to make sure you don't go out and get yourself accredited to do something that you're not going to be able to do. So make sure you understand those conflict of interest requirements clearly. But yes, there are opportunities to become an accredited proctor as an employee or an employer. Anyone else? Any other questions? Wow, we lost half the group, man. Time. Anybody have any other questions? Brian, Rhett?
Oh, that's
I think we're good.
greatly appreciated. Yeah, this is very thorough and very needed for those of you who stuck around. I mean, with almost 50 people still in the session after a couple hours, definitely a important topic that everybody should keep their eyes on and participate in any way, shape, and form by reaching out with the information that Rob discussed. You can reach Rob for additional questions. You can reach out to Bill Sloniker with additional questions. Brian does have this meeting recorded, so if anybody would like to see this meeting or share this meeting with their team, obviously these links are posted on YouTube, and Brian can get that to you. But we do appreciate Bill and Rob for coming in today and speaking, as well as some of the other folks who added in information. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I will share my screen just to show you when the next summit is coming up here. And you should